deeper and bring in Lorenzo Kamel, who is Professor of History of International Relations at the University of Turin and the author of The Middle East, From Empires to Sealed Identities. Thanks so much for joining us on the programme, Lorenzo. Really appreciate having you on. Now, Smotrich said on Monday that he's instructed his department to prepare, quotes, the necessary infrastructure for applying sovereignty in the occupied West Bank. Lay out for us what that would look like.
It will happen something similar to what happened to East Jerusalem. Back in 1980, Israel provoked strong international criticism when it annexed East Jerusalem and other territories conquered after the so-called 6 Days War of 1967. That served as an historical precedent and a template for further extension of Israeli sovereignty in the West Bank. And beside a facade of strong criticisms, nothing happened. We heard before the French official, Italians are doing pretty much the same, but Western countries have signed many commercial agreements that continue to provide weapons. So the bottom line for East Jerusalem was that it's still legally occupied. Only 5 out of 194 UN member states have their embassy in Jerusalem. Still, there are no consequences for this, and the same will apply for the selective annexation to which you're referring to. What is this selective annexation? In practical terms, means to take just some part of the West Bank, in line with what was the previous Prime Minister Naftali Bennett that mentioned this selective annexation clearly in clear terms. So to take just what is necessary for also not only for natural resources, but also for water, but also what they consider useful for security and so on. And they will leave some little autonomy on steroids. So this was the official expression used at the time by Naftali Bennett. And this once again, it will what will happen now.
Yeah. So it kind of seems that the plans being put forward by the finance minister isn't really something new. It's something that they've been trying to do for a very long time now. So clearly Smotrich is trying to seize on Trump's victory in the US election last week. We've seen how much Trump has supported Israel during his first term in office in the US. Do you see the president-elect really backing the annexation of the West Bank, and how crucial will his support be?
But judging from the fact that he received $100 million from Miriam Adelson, that is the wife of the late billionaire Sheldon Adelson, and this came with a string to appoint officials like, for instance, the ambassador that you were mentioning before, that would fully back for the selective annexation to which you are referring to. Most likely, Mark Rubio will be the Secretary of State. This is not official yet, but most likely this is what all the rumors where all the rumors point to. And so it means that there is a strong push in that direction that comes, once again, together with the strings to which we're referring to. So certainly the line is there, and unless there is a strong push on the other direction, for instance, by Europe, although, of course, we are looking at the situation also in Ukraine and so on, this seems pretty much alike. So unless this happens, so green light will arrive from the US part.
And we've had some reaction to Smotrich's comments. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad has said that, I'll just read this out. They've said that the comments from Smotrich is a tantamount to an admission of open war waged by the criminal entity against the Palestinian people. That's a very strong comment. How much of an escalation would something like annexing the West Bank be to the war in Gaza, for example, and the war in the wider region?
But once again, also in this case, nothing new in the sense Smotrich already 3 years ago was clearly pointing out the necessity to flatten the Gaza Strip. This is precisely the expression that he used. More recently, he called for the voluntary immigration, meaning the expulsion of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to other countries. And both him and the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, that was convicted by an Israeli tribunal back in 2007 for supporting a terror organization, have called for the annexation annexation of the West Bank. So once again, all this is not new. It's just a bit more visible today in somehow coming after this tragic year. And certainly also, of course, you were referring to the strong claims, sentence, and so on. Certainly, we need to stress that extremism strengthen one with the other. Certainly, also the Palestinian side with this group in a number of ways certainly did not serve the Palestinian cause. So once again, to take into account that the extremists of both sides, like in many other contexts, somehow are useful one with the other one.
And the West Bank has already been a hotbed of tension. We've seen it throughout the war in Gaza. We've had at least 700 Palestinians killed in the occupied West Bank since the war in Gaza began. Describe for us what life is like already for Palestinians in the occupied West Bank at the moment.
Yeah, I think to your question comes to my mind two examples. First, I remember on February 26th of 2023, so last year, I remember Haaretz, the Israeli daily newspaper, was titling about the pogrom of Huwara, this Palestinian village that was attacked by settlers. And once again, Haaretz was using this expression, pogrom, he used precisely this word. And then the second thing that comes to my mind is when the UNICEF on September 18, 2023, so once again, last year, was providing a report in which it was documented that the first 9 months of 2023 were those with the highest number of Palestinian children killed in the occupied West Bank. So once again, these two examples, among many others, are there to remind, of course, that structural violence was very visible, and the so-called temporary occupation of the Palestinian territory, which lasts since over 57 years, some structural violence there was very visible. Today, as I was mentioning, is perhaps a bit more explicit due to all the tragedy of that occurred after October 7, the terror attacks of Hamas and the killing of over 40,000 persons, and we've seen a huge amount of them children and women. So once again, this is more visible, but still to think that this started, or in any case was somehow unprecedented, like some people you tend to do, is extremely simplistic.
Yeah, it seems to have been going on for a long time now. Lorenzo, let's talk about the international community and how effective international law would be in a situation like this. We've had leaders from the Arab Islamic summits calling on the UN Security Council and the international community to take action against Smotrich's plans. How effective is international law here? Can it put an end to these kind of plans?
Yeah, let's first stress that the establishment of civilian settlements in the occupied territory was widely accepted as a war crime well before the so-called Rome Statute in 2002, and its provisions. So the Rome Statute was clearly pointing out that there is a prohibition to transfer part of your own civilian population. An occupied power cannot transfer part of its own civilian population into an occupied territory. And in this sense, even if you provide huge, massive incentives, for instance, free education, free housing, and so on, this is part, of course, of these incentives. On top of the Fourth Geneva Convention and also the United Nations Security Council resolution of 476, that was a resolution of the Security Council that, without any precondition, was clearly stating that acquisition of territory by force is inadmissible. So in this sense, these are the backbone of international law: Roman Statute, the Fourth Geneva Convention, the UN Security Council. So they go all in a certain direction. So it's clear to anyone that is informed and knows also the historical background, because unfortunately, I say this with a slight criticism, legal scholars often they miss the historical background that prevent to have really a thorough understanding of this. So taking together these two, historical and legal elements, we see that should be a strong and clear line that comes with sanction to any actor, be Palestinian, be Israeli, that runs under against international consensus and against these legal pillars to which I was referring to. Until that won't happen, we will continue to see this facade criticism here and there, but somehow the message that will be received by these authorities will be, okay, you can continue as you wish. If you just let me add one little example coming from my country, Italy, if you think like in the case of Egypt with Assisi, in Italy we discuss much about Regeni and so on. There were many calls for by the Italian authorities about Regeni and so on to provide answer, but then in practical terms, our country was the main providers of weapons to the Assisi regime, was having a huge role with any taking out fuel from Egypt. So the line, somehow, the message that we are giving to Assisi is that you can continue with that because the structural interests are there. So mutatis mutandis, the situation is similar here. The message can be, we can have some criticism, but in practical terms, the green light is there.
Very much a mixed message. Lorenzo, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts there and your